You have heard this phrase before. Moment of pain is worth lifetime of glory. It gets said at the bottom of a hard set. The last mile of a run nobody made you go on. In a cold shower, a man chose to step into on purpose. And in that context, it is true. And it is fairly easy to believe because that pain was chosen. You picked the discomfort. You can see the shape of the reward on the other side of it before you even start. I want to ask a harder question. Does that same promise hold for the pain you never chose and would never have chosen? The diagnosis that arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, the funeral you weren't ready for, the marriage that ended somewhere outside your control, the betrayal that came from someone who was never supposed to be capable of it. That kind of pain doesn't come with a training plan or a countdown. There is no version of it you signed up for on purpose, and no clean way to see the reward waiting on the other side while you're still standing in the middle of it. This episode is not going to pretend that question has an easy answer or rush you toward a tidy bow on top of something that might still be an open wound. I do want to tell you plainly where scripture actually lands on it because it is not silent on this. I think part of why this question matters so much is that most of the pain talk a man hears is built entirely around the chosen kind. Wake up earlier, train harder, choose the hard conversation. All of that is real and all of it is worth saying. I have said versions of it on this show plenty of times, but it leaves an entire category of men standing outside the premise, quietly wondering if the glory on the other side principle only applies to the pain you volunteer for and not to the pain that simply arrived and rearranged your life without asking permission first. Romans 8:18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. All wrote that sentence as a man who had been shipwrecked, beaten, imprisoned, and betrayed by people he had trusted. This was not a verse written from comfort about theoretical suffering. It was written by a man in the middle of a real thing, making a claim that would have sounded almost unbelievable to anyone watching his action live from the outside. Not worth comparing. That is a strong claim. And I want to spend the rest of this episode actually owning it instead of just repeating it at you. There is a companion verse a few chapters earlier in Paul's letters that I want to place right next to Romans 8. Because on its own, it can sound almost dismissive of real suffering if you are not careful with it. Second Corinthians 4, verse 17. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Light and momentary. If you have ever lost someone you loved, that phrase must land as an insult the first time you hear it, as if scripture is telling you your grief is small and should already be over. I don't believe that what this was. I don't believe that's what this verse is doing, and the context tells you why. This is the same man who, on one chapter, uh, this is the same man who, one chapter earlier, described himself as hard pressed on every side, perplexed, struck down. Light and momentary is not a claim about how the pain feels when you're inside it. It is a claim about the size compared to eternity. A comparison that is only fair to make from the far side of eternity, not from the middle of this Tuesday. So I want to be careful here because this is exactly where good theology gets turned into a weapon against grieving people. This was never meant to be said to someone mid loss as a way of rushing them past what they are actually carrying. It is a promise about where the pain is heading, not an instruction to minimize how heavy it is while you're still inside it. James gives you actual instruction for what to do when with unchosen trial while you're still in it. And it is not to skip ahead to the lesson. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Let perseverance finish its work, not rush perseverance, not skip perseverance and jump straight to the maturity on the other side of it. The verse assumes a process that takes actual time, and it explicitly warns against interrupting that process before it's done, which means the man who declares himself completely fine 3 weeks after a real loss, and the man who declares the pain permanently meaningless and refuses to let it move at all, both of them in different directions are interrupting the exact work this verse says needs to be allowed to finish. I want to name both of those exits specifically because I think most men default to one or the other, and neither one is actually strength. The first exit is numbing it, burying it in work, in silence, in a version of toughness that mistakes not feeling anything for handling it well. This man will tell you he's fine 2 weeks after something that would break almost most people, and he half believes it because he has gotten so efficient at not looking directly at the thing that he has convinced himself there's nothing to look at. The second exit is the opposite and just as dangerous, declaring the pain permanently meaningless, deciding somewhere early on that nothing good will ever come of it, that it was simply loss and nothing more, and locking that verdict in before the story has had any real time to keep unfolding. Both of these are attempts to end the story early. One ends it by pretending the wound isn't there. The other ends it by pretending the wound is the entire story with nothing left to write. Neither one is patience. Neither one is what James 1 is describing when it tells you that perseverance finishes work. Here is what I actually want to say to the man in the middle of the unchosen pain right now, today, whatever it is. God is not distant from you in this. Psalm 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Not close to the man who has figured it out, close to the brokenhearted, close to the crushed. If you are crushed right now, that is not evidence you have fallen out of God's reach. According to this verse, it is closer to the opposite. That is exactly the condition this promise was written for. I want to say something directly to whichever exit you tend to reach for, because most men lead toward one more than the other. If you are the numbing type, the one who has gotten efficient at not looking directly at things, I'm not telling you to manufacture tears or perform grief you don't feel on cue. I'm telling you that the efficiency you're proud of might be costing you the actual process this pain was supposed to process in you. This pain was supposed to produce in you. And noticing that, honestly, today is itself a kind of courage that numbing was never going to require. And if you are the other one who has already decided the pain was completely meaningless and nothing will ever come of it, I'm not asking you to fake optimism that you don't have. I'm asking you to leave the door open, not because you owe anyone a hopeful outlook, but because Joseph did not know at the bottom of the pit how the story would end either. And closing the door early is a decision, not a fact. I want to bring back a story I have referenced before because, because it is the cleanest picture in scripture of unchosen suffering actually being redeemed. And the timeline matters as much as the ending does. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, forgotten in a prison cell for years by people he had helped. None of it was his fault. None of it was something he had signed up for. And it was not a quick turnaround. By the time he was finally in a position to say anything to his brothers about what had happened to him, over a decade had passed. Genesis 50, verse 20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what what is being done, what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I want you to notice when he said that sentence. Not the week he was thrown in the pit, not the year he sat forgotten in a prison. At the very end, once the whole shape of the story had finally become visible, and even then, it does not erase what the pit or the prison actually cost him. He does not say the harm wasn't real. He says God intended something else through it, spoken from a vantage point he did not have access to. He did not have access to for most of the story. This is the part I want you to hear if you are still early in something. Do not force yourself to say Genesis 50, verse 20, while you're still living in Genesis 37. While you're still living in Genesis 37's pit. That sentence was true, but it was only available to Joseph at the end of a very long process he did not get to skip. If you are still in the pit today, the job is to not manufacture the perspective ahead of the schedule. It is to stay honest with God about how much it hurts and let the persevering keep doing whatever work it's doing on its own timeline, not yours. Even Christ did not skip the actual pain to get what it produced. Hebrews 12, verse 2. But the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Endured, not avoided, not skipped past. The joy set before him was real and it was future. And the cross, in the meantime, still had to be endured in full, including the anguish in Gethsemane the night before, where he asked God directly if there was another way. Model here is not painlessness, it is enduring the real thing while trusting there is something on the other side of it, even before that something is visible. I'm not going to close this by promising you a timeline because I don't have one to give you. I don't have one for myself. And anyone who promises you one is not being honest with you. Some of what you are carrying may not fully resolve into something you can see and name on this side of eternity. Romans 8:18 calls it glory that is to be revealed. Future tense, not always finished. Within a lifetime we can measure. That is allowed to be that is allowed to be true. And it is not a failure your faith, not a failure of your faith if the redemption of a specific pain doesn't arrive on a schedule you can point to. What is not allowed, according to everything we've covered today, is deciding today that the pain was purely meaningless or performing that You're past it before perseverance has already finished its work in you. So here is what I'm asking of you. Don't declare it worthless. Don't perform that you're over it. Stay honest with God about exactly how much it costs. The way Christ was honest in Gethsemane the night before he endured the cross anyway, and let perseverance finish its work, however long that takes. Trusting that the God who is close to the brokenhearted has not lost track of what this is producing in you, even on the days you can't see it yourself. This is built, not felt by the rice code. I'll see you on the next episode.